Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Let me first start with oil. Iraq protests have forced the first oil field shut in. This is from Girl. And I think the market is entirely underestimating the supply side risk. If I look across the Middle East, you've got this incredible flare-up in Iraq, where there's a lot of oil is actually produced. You've still got the Libyan situation, which is on a knife edge. Lebanon, okay, no oil there, but that's a tinderbox. And it's easy to forget because of the incredibly speedy recovery in Saudi Arabia, but that remains at risk as well. So I think the market is underpricing geopolitical risk. I know crude oil closed up $1.03 yesterday. We've given up a little bit of ground ahead of the market opening. But this is a 6-week high, and I actually, for one, expect us to push on from here. I can see WTI next stop 58 and even 60 on a more severe disruption, which I kind of expect. Home thoughts: this world is not our home. We are travelers, said Rumi, whose mausoleum I visited many years ago and got intoxicated as I watched the dance that they had in the basement of the mausoleum. It was a full moon, and really all his messages are so powerful. As you enter, it says, "Come, come, whoever you are, whatever you've done, just come." And I can't think of many other religious sites I've been to where the welcoming message was like that. I recently discovered Carlos Cruz-Diez, as you've discovered, no doubt. And I, for one, think he's really tremendous. Color is light, time and space. Color is not in the past, it is a continuous present, he says. This is chromo interference V12. He lived and worked in Paris since 1960, major protagonist in the field of kinetic and optical art, a movement that encourages an awareness of the instability of reality. His body of work established him as one of the key 20th century thinkers in the realm of colour. This is Physichromy 926. Description is perception of colour as an autonomous reality evolving in space and time, unaided by form or support in a perpetual present. Couleur Additive Series 007, and then two more, Lumière et Mouvement, Luce e Movimento, Signum Foundation, Palazzo Donna Venice, and finally Induction Chromatique 153, Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, United States of America. I really think he's tremendous. Political reflections. This is from Scaramucci. You got to vote because if you lose, it sends a really bad message. You can't let that happen to me. President Trump made the Kentucky governor's race about himself. And Scaramucci concludes by saying it's over for President Trump. The great people of the bluegrass states send a clear message. Now, I was writing about this in a wider article on the weekend. I was saying Trump was booed for the second consecutive weekend. He's undergoing an impeachment process at the hands of nervous Nancy Pelosi, his moniker, which probably is a linguistic transference in that she makes him nervous. And he was booed for the second consecutive weekend at this UFC 244 event, which they must have chosen because they thought it would represent his base of support best. At Madison Square Garden, I referenced the pollice verso or verso pollice, which is a Latin phrase meaning with a turned thumb. that is used in the context of gladiatorial combat. It refers to the hand gesture or thumb signal used by ancient Roman crowds to pass judgment on a defeated gladiator. The Madison Square UFC 244 Verso Police moment is a Shakespeare-level moment for President Trump, and of more import than the impeachment process, because impeachment is political and therefore the outcome should split on political party lines, but I'm beginning to doubt that as well now. I said that over the weekend the Republican Party will be making a hard-nosed political calculation that if the president is getting booed at a UFC event, the base is lost. And I was saying Vice President Pence is the coming man, and this could happen real quick. Virginia Democrats take control of both chambers of the state legislature for the first time in 20 plus years, further repudiation of Trump. This is going to happen nationally, Scaramucci says in 2020, wake up GOP. George Takei, Trump will see the election results in Kentucky as a hamburger of doom, indeed. MP Jacob Rees-Mogg in an incredible faux pas, which shows how out of touch some of these Conservative MPs are. In a nutshell, saying the Grenfell victims should have had the common sense to escape. That Stormzy tweeting. It's mind-boggling. Johnson is better off shutting him up entirely. 21st of October 2019, I was writing about this new economy of anger. And I said prolonged standoffs eviscerate economies, reducing opportunities, and accelerate the negative feedback loop. To wit, Hong Kong PMI was at 39.3 in October, the fastest rate of decline in private sector business activity in at least 21 years, back to when the survey started. That's from Birdie Word. Joshua Wong has told German media that Hong Kong ist das neue Berlin. So you can see the consequences of this response, which we've seen in Hong Kong, we're seeing in Lebanon, we're seeing all over the world. I feel, unlike Pepe Escobar, who says they're all separate cases, I think there's a common thread running through all of them, and therefore it is a global phenomenon. Iran, 1979, Iran hostage crisis recalled, National Security Archive. On November 4th, 1979, a group calling itself the Students Following the Line of the Imam stormed the gates of the US Embassy in Tehran, seized control of the compound, and took several dozen American diplomats, Marine guards, and others hostage. Thus began a 444-day ordeal that shocked the world, fundamentally altered the political scene in Iran, and cemented negative perceptions in the West of the country's Islamic leadership. The National Security Archive is posting a small sampling of declassified records that recall that pivotal episode. They include a memo from the National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski to President Carter suggesting several hardline actions, including replacing Ayatollah Khomeini as Iran's leader and even overt intervention. Although the overthrow owed much to the support of a sizable cohort of the population at the time, Washington's evident desire to manipulate Iran's internal politics would begin to fester in the collective memory. Among Khomeini's chief grievances was the charge that the regime was kowtowing to foreign, that is American, influence. Richard Nixon's decision to rely on Iran as a buffer against Soviet aggression in the Persian Gulf region removed any pressure the Shah felt from previous administrations to nudge the country towards meaningful internal reform. Listen to this. American embassy officials were instructed to avoid activities that might aggravate the Shah, including seeking contacts with his opposition, which curbed their ability to come to grips with the depths of popular animus against the regime. By the time Jimmy Carter took office in 1977 and a year later praised Iran as an island of stability in one of the most troubled areas of the world, the country was on the verge of a revolution. On January 16, 1979, Mohammad Reza fled the country, and 2 weeks later Khomeini returned from years of exile. And then talking about the events around the assault, saying that the final event that seems to have prompted the assault came on November 3rd, when National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, a noted hawk when it came to dealing with the Shah's opposition, met face-to-face with the head of the provisional government, Mehdi Bazagan, on the anniversary of Algeria's revolution, which was being celebrated in Algiers. The meeting was televised and made world headlines, but it also evidently led the Iranian student group to draw the wildly exaggerated conclusion that the United States might be on the verge of another regime change operation aimed at Iran, along the lines of the 1953 coup. Hoping to stave off any such possibility, they launched their own operation the next day. It is supremely ironic that we should stand accused of so much espionage out of our embassy in Tehran, since we have done so little. The crisis also helped precipitate the immensely costly Iran-Iraq war by feeding into Saddam Hussein's calculation that Iran was a vulnerable target. However, that Iran-Iraq war was not necessarily, it was an outcome which I'm sure the US was not entirely unhappy about, because it weakened Iraq and kept Iran bogged down. This is the photograph from New Year's Eve 1978 in Tehran, when Jimmy Carter toasts the great leadership of the Shah. I touched on this on the 28th of October on the occasion of the attempted rapprochement by Barack Obama with Iran at that time. And I said the recent rapprochement between President Barack Obama and Iran's Hassan Rouhani has certainly snapped a losing sequence in US-Iran relations that goes all the way back to the Iranian Revolution in 1979, when Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. The Shah was the second and last monarch of the House of Pahlavi, and otherwise known as the Peacock Throne. Barack Hussein Obama and Hassan Rouhani shared the same name, as did Prophet Muhammad's revered grandsons. Those who pursue the study of anthroponymy, personal names, especially in the Islamic world, probably view this as very fortuitous. And then I was wandering around the Hirshhorn Gallery in Washington last year, 2012 now, and I came across this from the Chinese artist Ai Weiwei, What's in a Name? A name is the first and final marker of individual rights, one fixed part of the ever-changing human world. A name is the most basic characteristic of our human rights. No matter how poor or how rich, all living people have a name, and it is endowed with good wishes, the expectant blessings of kindness and virtue. In 2013, I wrote, Hussein and Hassan are going to have to cut through a great deal of interference. In this situation, there are powerful vested interests fully invested in the status quo. If the Pax Americana in the Middle East were a three-legged stool, with the US as the most important leg, then Israel and Saudi Arabia are the other two legs of that stool. I said in 2013, neither Riyadh nor Tel Aviv are aligned with President Obama's Iranian rapprochement, and Saudi Arabia in particular has become increasingly forthright and is even threatening its own pivot away from the US. So that episode under Obama was really a trend reversal, which has itself been reversed, as you can see. The Shah of Shahs by Richard Kapuczynski is an extraordinary book. He gets criticized for not being accurate, but the accuracy is in the sketch that he paints. Oil creates the illusion of a completely changed life, life without work, life for free. Oil is a resource that anesthetizes thought, blurs vision, corrupts. What has made it possible for us to remain ourselves in spite of so many wars, invasions, and occupations is our spiritual, not our material strength, our poetry and not our technology, our religion and not our factories. And then my article over the weekend was at the moment of vision, the eyes see nothing. And then I said I've found as I've gotten older that time and even the world does not simply move in a linear fashion. And therefore I was referencing W.B. Yeats's The Second Coming, turning and turning in the widening gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. And I said, it's easy to see why that is the most quoted poem at the moment. Video leaked ABC insider recording exposes Epstein cover-up. We had Clinton, we had everything. ABC News anchor A. Roback caught on hot mic. This is a 7-minute clip of her speaking to her producer and talking about having all the story and it being suppressed at the time. 19th of August, I touched on Jeffrey Epstein, who had a collection of eyeballs on his wall. The eyeballs make sense because Epstein was a watcher. Is it a coincidence that we all live in a watch and collect digital economy? Maybe, but we feast upon each other in the 21st century. He was, in the words of the New York Times, not closely monitored. Jeffrey Epstein was a spy in a society of spies. He was a collector in a collector's economy. He was a watcher, and he died while nobody was watching. And then in my recent article, I was saying I'm of the view that Bitcoin and crypto is a Jeffrey Edward Epstein and his cast of characters level con. And I'm having nothing to do with it, other than occasionally looking in and admiring the sophistication and the level of the con. It's really breathtaking. The Chinese renminbi broke down below 7 and got to 6.998. We're currently back above 7 at 7.0050. This is the first time it's breached, gone back below 7 since August 5. And this is all because of optimism around the trade negotiations. The move higher on Tuesday came after the Financial Times reported late on Monday that Trump administration officials were debating whether to remove tariffs on $112 billion of Chinese goods as a concession to seal a partial agreement that could pause the trade war as early as this month. The move, if confirmed, can be regarded as a turning point in the US-China trade war, adding that market expectations have become increasingly upbeat on the prospects of a Phase 1 deal that would be followed by a more comprehensive agreement. The move past 7 was made by both the onshore renminbi, which is permitted to trade 2% in either direction around daily midpoint set by the central bank, and the offshore rate, which is less tightly controlled. 13th of August, I said the most important currency to watch is the renminbi. 26th of August, I was talking, because at that point it had depreciated about 10% over 12 months, and I said X's using it as a shock absorber and a very precise first responder to Trump, and therefore, for all the signal and the noise, I think there is reason for optimism, because I think you see that reason in the currency. Then, global bond market sell-off on China trade thaw revives tantrum fears. A sell-off across global bond markets deepened amid optimism over the potential removal of US tariffs on Chinese goods, while stronger than expected data on the US services sector also dented investors' appetite for safe haven assets. Treasuries slumped along with European and Japanese bonds. Slide took the 10-year yield more than 40 basis points above its 2019 low. Moves so far aren't extreme, but some market observers have suggested there are echoes. This time around, the Federal Reserve has played a similar role to the 2015 vintage ECB, signalling that it is taking a pause. So this global market sell-off deepened. This is from Holger's Twitter handle. US 10-year yield jumped around another 9 basis points to 187. France 10-year yield on course to be positive for the first time since July. This is the US 10-year yield. According to Market Ear, a close above 185 could create some dynamic. And then the Market Ear published this very interesting chart. What if yields now will start trending up again for 35 years? Look at that chart. And on the 24th of June, I wrote an article called The Wizard of Oz World, and I said this: when at last he grants an audience to all of them at once, he seems to be a disembodied voice. Eventually it is revealed that Oz is actually none of these things, but rather an ordinary conman from Omaha, Nebraska, who had been using elaborate magic tricks and props to make himself seem great and powerful. In June, I was saying we witnessed some Wizard of Oz level moves in the markets, and I was saying that this was not sustainable and would be reversed, and I think we're now in that reversal process. 3rd of June, I'd written about bond yields being in tilt mode and saying again that we'd see a reversal. One of the best examples of that Wizard of Oz level move that we saw, phenomena, was in the Austria century bond. Have a look at it. This is from the market here again, and you can see the reversal. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 110.76, dollar index 97.899, Japanese yen 108.97, Swiss franc 0.9928, the pound 128.80, the Australian dollar 0.6889, India rupee 70.9475, South Korean won 1158.47, Brazilian real 399.38, Egyptian pound 16.14, and the rand 14.7932. This is a dollar index chart. We've seen a little bit of a rebound. Look at that channel. It dipped when I thought it looked very, very bearish, but it's come back into the channel. But I still feel that we're going to see the dollar lose some ground now. Euro dollar 110.76 last. I'm expecting it to make up ground now that we're seeing bond yields move in the positive direction across Europe. SoftBank just reported results. It was a WTH type of operating loss at 700 billion. Loss was way bigger than even the most bearish estimate. That's David Inglis. As I said in another article about how safe havens were priced for Armageddon, and you can't go any further than Armageddon. The charge into havens, this was in the middle of August, has been spurred by flashing recession indicators, trade war tit for tat, and data disappointments, all amid thin liquidity. Gold at that point was up 18%, the yen was the top performer against the dollar across G10, and since then, now yesterday we saw gold endure its biggest loss of the month on trade optimism. It's currently at 1486, so it fell right through 1500. And then also silver prices slumped as well, and you can see both of them in this chart from Holger. Emerging markets, just some of the data which explains why Vietnam is doing so well: excellent education, low wages, high-tech focus, and large FDI. Sub-Saharan Africa, fantastic article by David Pilling, the 19-year-olds who will shape Africa's future. As a 12-year-old boy growing up in the slums of Kampala, to get money for internet time, Stanley Ollo used to sell scrap metal or break stones in the local quarry. I used to go to the internet cafe, I listened to Eminem, I googled who is this Eminem, the next day I had information, he says, of his hunt for digital street cred. Armed with knowledge, in this case, that the American rapper had recorded a song with someone called Rouhani, he felt ready to face his peers. So once they started talking about Eminem, I had data, he says, talking at breakneck speed during a gap in the radio program he now hosts. That's how I kept on progressing. That's how I became the cool guy around here who was hustling. Styling himself a youth motivator and social activist, he runs a program called Olo Experience Uganda, with campaigns such as Olo Green Teen Experience. I am too much on the internet, he says with a wide grin, clutching his iPhone 6 Plus, and I see a lot of things. The median age in Africa, the world's most rapidly urbanizing continent, is 19.4. That is about half the equivalent in Europe. Villages are dotted with solar panels, meaning most people live within reasonable access of a mobile charging station. Internet access, though expensive, is increasingly the norm, especially in cities where more than 4 in 10 Africans live. Smartphones, some assembled in Africa, are suddenly ubiquitous. While previous generations look back nostalgically to the liberation heroes who freed them from colonialism, today's young people are discontent with their crop of mostly geriatric leaders. This year, youth and professionals, particularly women, led a revolution in Sudan, ousting 75-year-old Omar al-Bashir, who for 30 years had run a nasty dictatorship held together by a joyless form of Islam. In Kampala, where I interviewed 3 19-year-olds for this piece, the politician of choice is no longer the septuagenarian Yoweri Museveni. Rather, it is Bobby Wine, a 37-year-old red beret-wearing, fist-pumping reggae star. When Atugonza finds a reliable man, she briefly used the Afro Introductions dating app with this in mind. She would like 4 to 5 children. Africa's population will double to more than 2 billion by 2050, as today's 19-year-olds have families of their own. In some countries, 2/3 of the population is under 25. Then talking to this girl who's 19, can-do inventiveness that shades into optimism. I'm filled with hope. The last thing I should be doing is losing hope right now in my own country. There's still hope that Uganda will reach somewhere technologically, politically, socially. I don't know why, but I'm optimistic. It was hustle, 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 he says. We had no money. We fed on birds that we shot with catapults. He says, adding that for Christmas, they ate one of the giant storks that roamed Kampala's rubbish tips. Stanley Ollo, this is a photo of him. We had no money. We fed on birds that we shot with catapults. Look at this. Next generation is going to be dominant in Africa. It's the youngest continent. 9th of September, I was writing on the occasion of Mugabe's death. And I said, most of the citizens in Africa are born free. The fight for independence was real, but is no longer relevant, is it? 29th of July, I wrote about the Oud Spring in Khartoum. 10th of June, I said the zeitgeist of the revolution in Khartoum was intoxicating. As I watched events unfold, it felt like Sudan was a portal into a whole new normal. Hugh Masekela said, I want to be there when the people start to turn it around, and I called Sudan a Masekela pivot moment. Erick Kabendera, who's been put in jail in Tanzania, political case journalist, fears he will die in prison. Politically motivated charges, is willing to admit wrongdoing despite his innocence, his sister Priska said. Magufuli has offered amnesty to prisoners accused of economic crimes in return for guilty pleas and fines. Annual inflation in Zimbabwe today stands at 504%, says Professor Stephen Henke. 21st of January said the mind game that ZANU-PF played on its citizens has evaporated in a puff of smoke. The point I'm seeking to make is that there is a correlation between high inflation and revolutionary conditions, and that Zimbabwe is a classic example. Dershowitz and Frey registered to lobby for sanctioned billionaire. High-profile defense attorney Alan Dershowitz and Louis Frey, the former FBI director, have registered to lobby for an Israeli billionaire investor who's been sanctioned by the US government. Dan Gertler, who the Treasury Department said amassed his fortune through corrupt deals in the DR Congo, hired Frey, Sporkin and Sullivan LLP to lobby Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, according to a registration statement it filed with Congress today. The filing was first reported by CNBC. Dershowitz says he doesn't agree with the government's charges, but would present a defence in the proper venue. Gertler, he said, is a wonderful, charitable man who's done a great deal of good for the world. The lobbying registration shows the work began in October. It describes Gertler's business activities as extractive industry and charitable activities. I actually met him. I was staying in Kinshasa, and there's a photograph there where you can see he's in the middle of the group. And 4th of February I said, maybe Dan Gertler is the puppeteer in Washington. The White House is very transactional. South African oil shares up 8.55% year to date, dollar around 14.8 as the optimism wears off. We'll head back towards 15.50. Egyptian pound 16.1387. EGX 30 up 13.45%. This man is splashing buckets of water on the flames at the popular Balogun market of Lagos, Nigeria. Nigerian oil share down 16.08% in 2019. Ghana Stock Exchange down 13.71% year to date. Eritrea accuses the CIA of planning to incite insurrection and protests similar to the Arab Spring. The statement says that a number of State Department officials mentioned by name held a secret meeting in Nairobi. That's via Ian Cox. Kenya plans tougher tax measures after seeing wider budget gap. The government, listen to this, is drafting a bill to empower the tax agency to enforce mandatory payment of tax even when it's being contested in the courts. The bill will be presented in 4 months, Kenyatta said. Kenyatta's comments come after the National Treasury increased its 2019-2020 budget deficit forecast to 6.2% of GDP from 5.9% earlier, following revenue shortfalls. Nikhil Hira, this is ridiculous. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? How long will a taxpayer wait for a refund if the case goes in their favour? Kwame says if the president thinks that the trick of getting out of this fiscal mess is by squeezing more taxes out of firms, then even he is not paying attention. There is no financial manoeuvre out of this. There were only 161 lawmakers present to speak of the National Assembly, Mr. Muturi said in a televised session, giving the President's amendments an automatic passage. There's been considerable debate around the propriety of what was done. Still current, this is a Foreign and Commonwealth Office Travel Advisory, 5th November, Safety and Security Section, Air Travel, summary edition of information about an ongoing Kenya Civil Aviation Authority audit inspection of Silverstone Air Services. You've got to watch the argument online, it's incredible. In response to 2 recent incidents involving Silverstone Air Services, the KCAA is conducting an audit inspection of the airline to determine the level of compliance with civil aviation regulations. This is Wilson Airport, which I've always found to be a magic portal to another world. I did not take the ox cart, but an aeroplane from Wilson. The airport was once located on the outskirts of Nairobi, but today it is in the city. It is very retro and has a style from a bygone era, which is to be treasured in this 21st century of ours. I find Wilson Airport is like a magic portal to another world. This is a photo I took on June 16, 2017. And what I found is that all those wonderful journeys always start at Wilson. This time I was going to Laikipia and Samburu. You can see some sunsets that I took. Nairobi oil share, 1 year return is 19.2%. It's up 15.88% year to date, and the NSE 20 is down 3.66% year to date. Thank you for stopping by.